Welcome to Gen Z, the official podcast of Realm Contracting. Stay tuned while we explore the latest resources, thoughts, and trends in apprenticeship and workforce development for high school students. And now, here's your host, John Hayden.
Welcome today, Gen Z audience. We're proud to have Congressman Brett Guthrie with us today. We're going to be talking through some issues with our workforce development and working our way through these items of importance to us. Brett, we're glad to have you here today. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks so much for having me here today. So these issues are real important to me. My career, essentially, I out of college went to the military, so I spent a few years in the 101st Airborne. But then after that, my father had started in a factory in Bowling Green, an aluminum foundry. So I went to work after the Berlin Wall came down, and it seemed like it really looked like in 1990 the Army was going to be a boring place to be for the next 20 years, which is anything but. And our men and women who've sacrificed a lot in the last now 30 years since I was out, a little over 30. But I went into manufacturing. My father had worked for Ford Motor Company. He made aluminum castings. They shut the plant down where I grew up, and he decided to move to Bowling Green and start a business. So immediately I was, these issues are important to me. I was in the middle of trying to help manage a quality lab, a manufacturing lab, trying to find skilled people. At that point, it's changed a lot now, but at that point in Bowling Green, believe it or not, one of the fastest growing cities in the Commonwealth, we had lost FMC Corporation. A lot of businesses had gone out of business, so the unemployment rate was high. So it was easy to get people just to come work. But what we learned, there were a lot of underemployed people, that we needed people in skills. So I actually got involved in working with our tech school, trade school, trying to figure out, get people that were already working every day to go on to become tool and die people.
Right.
Layout, we call layout or CMM, we call it coordinated measuring machine.
Right.
Operators, CNC. And we were able to, the best people we found to get into those programs and to move up were people already working in our factory. So those were kind of the issues that I saw. I remember a lady coming to me who was, I think, 17 or 18 when she dropped out of high school and had a baby. And now she was in our quality lab, and we were sitting around trying to do layout, which is angles and things people aren't. I think maybe some of the industry people will be watching. And I just said, wow, you just did trig. She did something in her head. She goes, oh, I never took trig. I said, well, you didn't take it, you just did it in your head. So I encouraged her to go back to school. And I learned really quick that the way I did school, I did it a little different because I did military school, but most people that I knew, 18 to 22, went off to college, football, fraternity, sorority, got degrees and came back and got into work. But what I learned, if you're 33, 34 years old and you have a 16-year-old at home, it's difficult to go to the schedule of a college today.
Correct.
You don't want to do 16 hours every twice a year and take you 4 years to get a degree. 4 years was an eternity. 4 years was the difference in her daughter being a teenager and being out of the house.
Right.
And so that was a very valuable time for me to learn that we need the 4-year schools that people want the traditional background and can afford it and have the opportunity to do it. I think it's the best way to do college. But we have a lot of people, not just college, but post-secondary. When I say college, I mean post-secondary, tech school, trade school, all the other, just going to truck driving school, some of those types of skills that we have to change our model, because there's a lot of people who've learned and realized and understood that the decisions they made in high school or before is not going to allow them to have a sustainable workplace. Lifestyle.
Correct.
They really want. But if they have the skills, they can.
Right.
And so they need to go back and do it. And we need to make that available to them. So I got involved in adult ed, ended up running for the state senate, and then now into Congress.
So how long have you been in Congress?
I got elected in 2008. It's hard to believe the time has gone that fast. But 2008, the military, quite honestly, a lot of things that we talk about in terms of skills training are state. And so I got involved in education committee and things at the state level. At the congressional level, I was interested in Congress, the military, the debt and deficit. But when I got there is a role for the federal government to play in its appropriate federalism context, which most of the action in education is state and local. But there is a role for the federal, and I've tried to get on that. I'm on Education and Labor Committee, we used to call it the Workforce Committee,
right?
In order to try to encourage more people to get these kind of, if you get a post-secondary degree, certificate, I'm not talking, like I said, a 4-year college degree, you can earn a good living in America now. We have 7 million open jobs.
Oh, yeah.
Most places you walk into, the first thing it says, almost everybody's hiring, but if they're not physically, like if they're not putting out help wanted signs outside, or if they're not really, they said, I would hire the right person. I've never met a business really since right after I first got in was the financial crisis. But since we've come out of the financial crisis, even when the economy wasn't growing like it is now, back in the, in 2010, 11, 12, 13,
Right.
there were still people saying, if somebody came through the door with the skills I need, I would hire them today.
Absolutely. And we go in high schools today, and I tell seniors that are graduating high school and not going on to college that if they can't find themselves a good job within 30 days of graduating high school, they're not trying very hard.
Right, exactly.
And to back up on your statement a minute ago of truck driver, truck driving positions is one of the biggest things in America that we're running short of right now.
Absolutely. There are trucking companies that turn down loads
because they can't get the drivers. They got more trucks than they have drivers.
Oh, I had and I do town halls a lot, and I have people come to me and talk about minimum wage, and they'll say, well, I know a family of 4 is living on minimum wage, whatever, because the mom or dad's working somewhere else. And I always say, you just said the opposite, the optimal word. They're working.
Correct.
If somebody is showing up for work every day and they're wanting a 40-hour week, ability to raise a family kind of job, and they're working for minimum wage, you can't do that. But if they're showing up for work every day and get into a training program, they absolutely will be able to. And in truck driving school is usually 4 to 5 weeks.
Yes.
And then somebody, when this came up, is specifically not in this county, but a different one, they said, well, they'll have to be over the road. I said, well, sometimes to earn a living, you have to sacrifice and do things like that. But even if you're not over the road, I know your business has CDL drivers, I'm sure.
And we're actually going to, in the school year 1920, we're actually getting ready to add CDL to our apprenticeship program.
Well, that's great.
Because of that, as long as the student or the CDL driver stays within the state, they can get their CDL license at 18.
Right.
So for vocational use, garbage truck drivers, dump truck drivers, construction, concrete drivers, those are all Class B CDLs that a high school graduate with the right CDL license is very viable for that job.
Well, and that's what those commercial driver's licenses, people say, they're valuable for a lot of things. So if a family doesn't want to go over the road, now that's where the money is. I'm not going to deny. If you're willing to hit the road on Monday and come back on Friday, and most trucking companies need drivers so bad that they will coordinate for them.
They're getting them home.
They'll get them home on occasion or more on a regular basis. But I think Walmart has spent about $90,000 for experienced drivers now.
Correct.
But if you go to a convenience store, sit there, all the trucks that come in and unload Coca-Cola and other products, those are drivers. I mean, those are CDL drivers as well, and pay good money because there's not enough of them. So it's not just CDL, it's just this idea that we have to get across in America is that you don't have to have a 4-year degree to earn a sustainable, livable wage.
No, you do not.
But you can't just show up and not have a skill.
And that's one of the things.
You have to bring a skill to be able to, so the business can afford it. And that's what we're trying to, how do we get skills into the hands to people and match them up with the right businesses?
And this starts at the high school level because we've got to train these young men and women to understand the soft skills that they need to acquire when they do graduate and enter the workforce. And one of those soft skills is you got to show up for work.
And show up on time.
And show up on time and bring an attitude with you that's good, and you will be 85% of the, you'll be automatically 85% of the rest of the workforce if you just show up and have a good attitude.
Absolutely. Well, we were in a meeting on this because it's on the mind of the Congress, I can tell you, these issues, because one of the constraints on the growth of the economy is a good skilled workforce. And one member of Congress from East Tennessee says, I was touring businesses and I said, what kind of skills do you need? And the guy says, I want somebody that can show up and pass a drug test. And once you get somebody showing up for work every day and you see their work ethic, it's a lot easier. Now, it's not easy for the person, but it's a lot easier for businesses to plug them into the right skills training and be willing. Because if you have somebody that's coming to your plant every day, I can just from personal experience, plant every day, you get to know them, you know their family, and then all of a sudden you say, you know what, you encourage, then you become encouraging. Why don't you go to like the lady I was saying about that said she couldn't do math? I said, well, you can't, you may not be able to do it, but you are doing it. Or you might not think you're able to do it, but you are doing it. So then you get them working and they move up. That's our business. Most of our managers, not necessarily our engineering and our stuff that really accounting that requires a 4-year degree, but supervisors, plant managers, those types of people with real leadership roles, earning a good living with really good benefits, are people who started working in the factory.
Yes. Speaking of which, do you all still have your factory?
We do. My brother runs it. I have 3 brothers, and so we bought my father out, and so we've now. I'm part of the ownership now, and I have 3 brothers that do it, so we all own a 4th.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's down in Bowling. We sell to General Motors and Ford, and people that sell to General Motors and Ford.
Well, because of this lack of skilled labor that we have, how do we, especially at the federal level, what level of the federal government can they actually get involved in this to help the matters at a local level?
Well, trying to be respectful of the federalism side, it is state and local, and the reason the state and locals know their needs better than the federal government coming in and put in so much. You know, even if it was the role of the federal government to get in and manage programs for individual localities, which it's not, but even if it was, there would be so many strings attached. A lot of times the federal money that comes to job training, people say, well, I know in the K through 12 system, I had a superintendent say, federal money is about 15% of my budget, about 80% of my paperwork. So we want to, and so it needs to be flexible at the local level. So there's several things that we've done. I was involved in doing the Workforce Investment Act updates, now called the Workforce Investment and Opportunity Act, WIOA. And that's where you have, and what we wanted to make sure is the money was not spent, it's your tax dollars that flow to Washington, but the decisions weren't made in Washington. They actually went to state workforce boards. So there's a state workforce board that we wanted to make sure that each workforce board had a business majority, so that people who are looking for, the worst thing in the world you can do is train somebody for a skill that's not needed.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that it's needed. There's local workforce boards. I can tell you if you're in Bowling Green area, it is industrial maintenance. That's what you need people for because there are a lot of factories.
Correct.
You're in other parts, like we said, it could be, I know there's a more rural county that needs truck drivers because they have kind of they're off I-65, and they says if we can get our people driving trucks who are underemployed, get them on the road, they can be home because Walmart I keep bringing up Walmart, so bring up other stores too, but I know they're paying $90,000, and if you live a mile or two off I-65, you can pretty much get home every few days, and so it depends on the local boards, and when I talk about industry too, we're kind of hit on this. We need the local industry staffs to get in the game as well. So the things that we work on is Workforce Investment Act, which is spent through the state. We send money to the Career and Technical Education called the Perkins Act. Perkins was a member of Congress from Kentucky, from Appalachia. Carl Perkins was his name. He was the chairman of Education and Labor, I guess, probably in the 70s and 80s. And so we have the Perkins money that actually goes to pre-graduate, so high school. And another thing, we work on the Apprenticeship Act to try to promote apprenticeships. Because one of the things that will happen, I know your business is very aggressive in training. Our business is very aggressive in training. Well, if somebody, one, you want to spend money training because you want that person to work in your factory.
Correct.
That's kind of the way we look at it. In your business, you want them spend money because you want them there. But you also, it maybe be altruistic or whatever, but we want them to have a skill that if a better opportunity comes along, that they can say, hey, I'm in the Trace Diecast training program, but it's recognized by a national certification board. So let's say it's it's tool and die maker. Then I went through the Trace program, but I have a certificate that says I can't just work on Trace equipment, I can work on tool and die. So what we're trying to do is give through industry training, a nationally recognized credential. So if the individual has it, now, giving it to them means they may leave your business, but it's better for them.
No, it is. And what we have found in our apprentice program, which our
They'll usually stay, won't you, because you're investing in them.
And well, in our RAM apprentice program is within the Kentucky apprentice program,
right,
which is recognized across the state of across the nation.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the things that we found in our visits with talking to these young men and women in the high school level is they want to graduate. We think because they don't want to graduate from college that they don't want to graduate from anything, and that's just not true.
Right.
They want to graduate. They want that certificate in an apprenticeship or something that they feel like that they have earned, and they have earned it.
Oh, they haven't. We had a very aggressive training program just in skills, industrial skills, and a little maintenance, a little tool and die, and we took everybody through. And I'll never forget this one family. We had our first kind of graduation thing, and there was one guy I'll never forget, and families taking pictures like he just walked across Harvard Yard, and this guy was probably 40-ish. With teenage kids or older, 20 kids in their 20s.
Proud as he could be.
They were as proud of him as they could be. And because it's not the world that I came from, it's just different for me. It's just different opportunities. And I said, boy, they're taking a lot of pictures of, his name was Leonard. I won't say his last name. He's passed away, unfortunately. But boy, they're taking a lot of pictures of Leonard. He might have been in his 50s. And they go, his wife said that he's the first person in our family that's ever gotten a piece of paper for completing something academic. So none of his kids, who were probably in their 20s and 30s, and I guess his grandkids were moving towards that, had graduated from high school.
Well, we don't.
Once they see him get the pieces of paper, it inspires them to do
right.
so.
And we haven't had our apprentice program long enough yet for somebody to graduate from it. But we have two on. Well, we have four now. But we actually celebrated them being invited into the apprentice program, and we treated them at the high school level like they were signing a scholarship.
Right.
Just like an athletic scholarship. We went to their schools.
That's
and
great.
and they were really proud of it, and which was good. That was the whole intent, is that one, we wanted them to be proud of it, and two, we wanted them to know that we were proud that we were getting them.
And exposes the other people that, hey, why can't you do this?
They can.
I was never going to get a high school or college scholarship to play sports. but you see other people get stuff for training programs.
Yeah.
You can make that. People can make that happen. That's great that you do that. And it is important to show because so the lady on the Apprenticeship Act, her name is Susan Davis from California, and I are working on it together.
I was just going to ask you about that.
She's a Democrat from San Diego, kind of inner city San Diego. Her husband's from Louisville, so it's kind of interesting to marry a guy from Louisville. So we kind of buddied up, and and aside to that. There are a few things we just completely disagree on in D.C., and that's what you see on television every night. Things like this, people really try to work. That's not really partisan.
Correct.
People work together to try to get solved. But she and I have studied the Swiss model. So a guy so Switzerland, almost everybody in Switzerland goes through an apprenticeship program. So it's like 2/3 of the people who get out of high school go into apprenticeship programs, and about 20% go to college. Some go to workforce. And then some just kind of get lost in the system like everybody. Like every country has those that you can't really account for, unfortunately. But 2/3 of the people go through apprenticeship programs. And when I say that, it's people who are bankers, people who are insurance, a lot of their professionals.
That are going through apprenticeships.
They go to apprenticeships to do that. So they say, why go to a college to learn finance when you can learn it in a bank? So they don't really do college the same way we do here. But the head of education, the minister of education for Switzerland, said his children all went through apprenticeship programs. Here are people who have 4-year degrees and beyond want their kid to go to college, or they feel like my kid's not going to college. They like working with it. They try to apologize for it.
That is
there
correct.
they don't. They don't at all. And I remember Susan Davis saying to the guy, was that a cultural shock that you had to get over, that kids aren't going to go to college, they're going to do apprenticeship programs? And he goes, well, actually, this goes back 500 years. It's the old guild system. So it's just in their nature. And I don't think we're ever going to get people who are going to be on the path to be bank presidents and other professions to go to apprenticeships instead of college.
I would agree. And one of the things that we did last year in our apprentice program through the schools was we had a parent meeting. Mm-hmm. Because parents are our biggest struggle.
Right.
For getting these kids to join an apprentice, because mommy and daddy wants them to go to college.
Because of the prestige. And
that's correct. That is exactly correct.
Move the professionals that way, but we need to raise the prestige of it so that people realize that if they're going to be tool and die, just the world I'm in, so that's why I bring that.
Correct.
Health sciences, operating, our factory, 20 years ago was an old smokestack factory. Now it's all robots runs a lot of things. And it's funny, people say you automate and you replaces employees. Actually, we were forced to automate for lack of finding employees. Instead of you can't find somebody short work every day, you have to have the robot but you're going to pay somebody a lot of money
to program the robots.
If one robot's doing the work of 10 people, and one robot goes down, you're losing the work of 10 people. So you're going to pay I'm not sure you're 10 times the average, but it is 6 figures with overtime.
But it's still
can repair and fix
because they are going to break down, and they do need the programming.
You got to get them fixed.
Yes,
you got to get them programmed. You got to get them moved forward.
Which is where the technology part of all of our industries have stepped up to. Even in the dirt business, I mean, we have technologies, and that's the one thing that is allowing our apprentices to really be successful at running a dozer. He's got a computer in there that's got GPS on it that tells him where he's at and what he needs to do.
Farmers farm by GPS.
That is correct, and that's just the world we're all headed to, whether we think we are or not. Yeah. It's where we're going, and we might as well embrace it. Which is also what's going to allow us in our apprentice program to take an 18, 19-year-old young man and put him in a dozer. He will be successful in that dozer inside of a year.
Oh, yeah.
Without that GPS technology, he could not be successful in that short period of time.
Oh, it's like tool and die making. I mean, if you were going to be a tool and die maker in the 1960s, when my father's group kind of was going through the Ford Motor Company plan, he would take you an apprenticeship and to be a journeyman years. Now it's essentially setting up the machine to do it.
Correct.
But so you can learn to do it pretty quickly.
Which is what technology is going to, as long as you embrace the technology, I personally think it will be somewhat of the remedy of our workforce problem.
Absolutely. And I think, so you get to the workforce problem, so the biggest things that I've tried to work on for our NDCs, one, so the workforce, so I remember being a senior and telling a lot of anecdotal stories, but they're important to why I think the way I think, I believe. But when I was a senior in high school, I remember I used to think I was going to be a football player in college, but that didn't work out. But I was a senior in high school, showing up for football college. The first day we're seniors. Can you believe it? We're been together for most of us 12 years. And we're talking about what we're going to do. And I'll never forget this one guy saying, I know my father's got pull, which is what you'd say, and he can get me on at Ford.
Okay.
And so if you were 17 years old in my hometown and you could get a job at Ford when you're 18, graduate from high school, that's all you did, you could earn a middle class living. That was just what you could do. But showing up in a factory without skills today is different. By the time we graduate from high school, they announce they're closing the plant. And so all Ford and GM, so I'm getting to where I am with Ram, Ford and GM and those companies you would show up, you'd work, and if you want to be a tool and die maker, they put you in an apprentice program, put you in journeyman's program. That all kind of went away. And so we're kind of at a generation gap. I remember people saying, one of these days, all these people that know how to do this work's going to retire, and we're going to have a big gap of people who can't do that kind of work, and we're here.
We are here.
And we're here. And so we're in the generation gap. So the two things that we're talking about you do is that, well, how do we, instead of somebody learning how to taking a block of steel and making a tool, how do you train them to train the machine to program the machine to make the block of tool? Because it's difficult to do. It's easier work. It's difficult to do, but it's not as long as having to learn how to do it with your hands.
But that's what this Generation Z is going to be good at.
They like
because
computers.
They are not scared of the computers. They embrace the technology, and in the old school factory, and even probably some factories today, they don't allow this generation to take like their phones. The first thing they want to do is take their phones away from them.
Right.
And you can't go to work with a phone in your pocket anymore. Well, that's not going to work with this generation. It's just not. The older generation, such as myself,
right,
we act like that phone is not important to us. But we always know where it is, and it's always on. About 90% of our business comes through that phone.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so we just mask the fact. Now, the Generation Z doesn't mask it. They live and die. We've got an apprentice right now that is getting ready to take his CDL test tomorrow. He has done his complete study guide on this on YouTube.
Really?
Has not read one word of it himself. He has watched this entire thing on YouTube, his walk around. Everything he needs to know about passing his CDL is on YouTube.
I've just recently started doing first things like how do you know when a pork roast is ready on the grill? I go right. That's what I did. The reason I said because I did it this weekend. Go to the what temperature?
You can go anything you need to know is on you, and if it's not on YouTube, it's on Google.
Yeah, how to do it that way. But so we get into the different levels. So I'm excited about where we're going with workforce because one is the federal. So what we're doing with the federal is apprenticeship. Your credentials transferable across state lines. So if you're going to live if you live in Bowling Green, you may work in Portland, Tennessee. If you live in Portland, Tennessee, you may work in Franklin, Kentucky. So we need to be able to go across state lines. The other one is businesses are investing in this now. I know you're probably one of the best examples in Kentucky that I've seen. How do you let smaller, we call the partnership act, what if you get let's get 5 of us who are in the same kind of business across the state together and come up with a program together because you get scale. Now, some people may say, well, if you do that, you're kind of collaborating with labor, you're antitrust. So I know a lot of businesses aren't big enough to be antitrust. We want to make sure people have a clear path that when it comes to developing apprenticeship programs, they can come together. That's what the Partnership Act is, without fear of government saying you're collaborating. We're trying to do that with insurance too, so smaller people can afford insurance with the associated health plans. So that's a federal. But what I've seen, so my experience of the Ford plant closing, this generation gap, and it's just been ignored. I mean, shop when I was in school, because people did it at the industry, shop was where you put people that you just want to get a diploma. You didn't want them to be, this is how it was when I was in school, didn't want them to be disruptive, so you stuck them in shop.
Correct.
And they spent the whole year coming up with woodworking, so because we usually graduate around Mother's Day, their product would be like a jewelry box or something for their mom. That's what shop was when I was in school. Now, if you go to Hardin County, every county is putting together. Here in Washington County, you can learn to fly on simulators in Washington County High School because they're trying to make it interesting to people.
Well, and that's also back to your analogy of the shop. That's what these schools have been doing with the A schoolers.
Right.
Is they send them to the area technology centers. Now the more progressive school districts are figuring out that these area technology centers can be an enormous asset to their district. So some of them are now trying to figure out how to get A schoolers where they belong and get this technology center back to producing specific things that are in your specific areas. Because it doesn't do any good to have nursing at your area technology center if there's not a hospital anywhere to be found.
Right.
And that is one thing that we're finding in our communication with the school districts, that they're starting to pay lots and lots of attention to this workforce development and developing the workforce specific to the specific needs in their areas.
Right. That's what we want. That's one of the workforce investment money that we pass goes down to the local boards. That's the idea.
Yeah, because they can make those decisions.
I don't know if you've seen the new hospital in Owensboro that's been there for a year or so. That's just fabulous. I mean, and so they need more nurses. So if you looked at from a federal level, what's one career that we have at Big Short? We know we don't have enough nurses. So if it was a federal thing, mandate everybody across the needs to create nurses. And exactly what you said, if you're miles from a hospital. And of course, there's doctors' offices and things.
That's correct.
There's rows for nurses and everything, but there's more demand in some area than others, and that's what we wanted to let the local groups come at. But what's happening though, as you say, you're talking about just nursing. The medical center in Bowling Green, because that's my personal example, has got involved in nursing programs because they say we don't have enough nurses. Western Kentucky University is not producing enough nurses.
Right.
And a lot of it is because of facility space, instructor space. So they've actually built a medical complex along with their hospital to get more healthcare professionals through. And you're seeing that in industry. And I think what's happening, somebody said the other day, you see a lot of K through 12 systems. I hear your superintendent's great at it, is trying to get more and more involved in tech training when it was just kind of, my experience was when I was in high school 30-something years ago, it was just where you put kids you wanted just to get through the system.
Correct.
Now they're really making it matter, I believe, in most school districts. And I think what's happened, people like you or yelling at your economic development. Not that you would yell, but raising your concerns, your economic development people, your Chamber of Commerce people. Why should I be a member of the Chamber of Commerce? You aren't doing. What are you doing for my biggest need workforce? That's happening in Bowling Green. I can tell you that. And so all of a sudden, the Chamber of Commerce leaders are going after the superintendents, saying, all I hear from my businesses is not that they need more capital, which everybody does, or they need this, that, or the other. They need more workers, and you're not producing them. So there's become this...
and they need them in skilled areas.
Yes. It is push, and I think the school system, and I know Washington County in particular, now they do, I don't know how many jobs there are for pilots in Washington County, but it gets people interested in the tech program. So I think those programs are great because it gets people, I'm going to go to the tech school, I'm going to learn how to, they have the simulators here on the computers, learn how to fly.
Right.
In the meantime, I'm going to tech school and I can learn, if I learn how to fly, I may want to be interested in robotics. I may other
there's so many different areas.
Just getting them into the tech school where it changes that persona we're talking about very early about tech school is a cool place to be.
Well, and that brings up a subject that this younger generation needs to figure out is that once you get within an organization or an industry, there is so many different pathways of career choice. Just in the construction industry, even from the skilled work side between operators and mechanics and drill operators and blasters that blow up rock. I mean,
Right.
There's so many different areas of career choices. They get pigeonholed and they think when they're 18 and 19-year-old that what they start out doing is what they're going to do the rest of their life.
Well, there's a very famous kind of case of that where Amazon was going to locate in a congressional district in New York, one that's represented by a colleague of mine, Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, and they ended up saying we don't want, because these are just basic entry-level jobs. Well, Amazon is in my district. They're in Bullitt County.
Right.
So go to Bullitt County. Zappos is there, Amazon Prime, Amazon, all the other different, there's like 3 or 4, and walk in, and there are a lot of people just loading boxes. And you can see that. But there are a lot of conveyors, there's a lot of computers, there's a lot of managers, there's a lot, and I would say
they generate a lot of other career paths.
A lot of other career paths, and I would tell you if Amazon is the kind of place that if somebody's there loading shoes, they actually pay them, I think they've gone up to $15 an hour anyway. Somebody just loading boxes, shoes in a box. But if that person putting shoes in the box, I know they, because I've seen their training program, wants to be a conveyor mechanic, which is, if you've seen the conveyor systems, they're incredibly intricate and be worth a lot of money, they'll send you to the school to do it.
But they
So it's just very short-sighted to say we don't want entry-level jobs. Because entry-level jobs lead to the kind of jobs we're talking about.
And what really leads to the other jobs is back to our soft skill conversation. If the guy that's touching the boxes every day shows up every day, brings a great work ethic with him and a good attitude, I promise you he or she will not be touching boxes for very long.
Well, you've seen it, and that's why hopefully people who in Congress or in government who've never really worked in a business like that, you just want your people to be successful.
Correct.
You'll go out there now. I was telling you about the lady who worked in. I was just dying for her to be successful because she was such a good person. Had everything you just said. Work every day, great work ethic, wonderful attitude. Had made, I'm not even sure what the situation was when she was in high school, but obviously having a baby in high school is not the best decision to make. I'm not sure what her circumstances was, but then you know what she told me after so we paid for her to go to college. She got a couple of years in. And she came back to me and she says, you know what, the biggest thing I never understood is that my daughter sees me studying, now she's studying. And she wasn't a good student. And she was repeating the pattern. And then she sees me break the pattern and she breaks the pattern.
Somebody's got to break the pattern. Somebody's got to break the pattern on the workforce problem. And that's somewhat what RAM is trying to do, is to just, we've just been the type of company that we've seen a problem, we talk about it and complain about it long enough, and we finally decided that we had to know there was something that we could do about it for us. And we're convinced that if more industry would take the same approach, it's not going to get fixed overnight. It didn't happen overnight. This whole evolution of everybody's got to go to college has been it's been going on for 20 years, and now we've all realized that to go pick up a phone right now and get a plumber to your house, if you can get a plumber to your house inside of 2 weeks, you probably know a plumber. Otherwise, or an electrician, or anything that somebody's out there getting their hands dirty with, is hard to get them to come do anything for you.
I tell you, the dirty jobs, as you want to call them. It's funny, whenever I tour technical schools, you will see people doing the flight simulators, the robotics competition, and things like that, which I am 100% for, because it gets them into the door and makes tech school cool, right? But you'll go, whenever I speak to people, the electrician, the HVAC, the plumbing, and you don't see much bricklaying anymore, but I think we're losing that skill. But that would be one. I always tell them, I said, I know some of you probably don't like math, but I'm telling you, you better take a business course, because every one of you in here are going to be being paid $30 an hour for your work, and you're going to see your bill, and they're going to be billing you for $75 to $100.
Yeah.
And you're going to go, why can't I do that? And there's low barrier to entry if you got the skills. So I tell them that. So almost everyone, electricians, HVAC, plumbers, you're going to have a van with your name on it, and you're going to be your own business person. You're going to be an entrepreneur. So you need to learn at least business math as you move forward, because you're going to see, why should I get paid $30 an hour in I don't know what it costs to do a plumber. My wife does that. It's over $100 now, isn't it?
Right.
An hour. And bill, and the difference is I could have that money. Sure. If you and laugh at all your friends that didn't study the right things in college, as you move forward.
So how do we, in your opinion, how do we get industry and education in a bigger collaboration of these two entities coming together to figure this out?
Where I see areas that are successful is if they have like an active business, like a Chamber of Commerce, a business group, economic development, a Chamber of Commerce, those types of groups that are trying to bring industry in, and the first thing industry says, where's your workforce, what's your workforce? And that seems to be the one that pulls it together. Then they go to the superintendents and say, businesses are going to do, I got to know how many kids are coming out of these programs, because that's what this industry that wants to relocate or expand or move forward. So I think that's kind of the glue with it. It's coming. It doesn't come short.
No,
but I will tell you, from the federal level, and I think Governor Bettman from the state level, and I think you're probably seeing at the local level, having your legislators for sure. I know you've had Jimmy Higdon on the show. They've invested a lot of money. I think we have Tom Buford and Kim King in Washington County have invested a lot of money in tech schools and programs and moving forward. The biggest thing, we have to get people to attend, to come.
That is correct.
Because I think the state and the federal will invest the money as long as people are attending the programs. And I've seen, particularly starting with CDLs or commercial driver's license in schools, their biggest problem is getting people to show up and take their courses.
Yeah.
And we've got to get, so another thing that we try to do at the federal level, I think it's a big thing at the federal level, is making sure we reform our benefit programs, SNAP or food stamps, Medicaid and so forth, where people are encouraged to work. And the governor, Medicaid is run by the state, so the governor made a big effort to try to have a work requirement if you're single, or I don't know if it's single, but able-bodied, without dependents at home, to Medicaid. We try to do that with SNAP or food stamps, that if you're 18 to 59, able-bodied, working age, that you had to have some work requirement. Because the problem is, the current rule is the day you earn a penny over the minimum, 150% of poverty or whatever of each program, then you lose everything. And so people are, if you were
avoiding that.
Well, if you were the mom I was talking about who's worked for us, went to college, say you were on Medicaid, and all of a sudden you were going to go get a job with good benefits, but even good benefits has some premium copays and deductibles.
Right.
Medicaid. So if you're a single mom with Medicaid and your child may have asthma or diabetes or something like that, you can't afford to go to work.
Correct.
Because you lose your Medicaid benefit.
Right.
And you can't, as your income grows, you grow into paying those premiums and copays.
Do you see this beginning to change?
Well, we really pushed for it in the the governor has really pushed for it.
The governor,
at the state level.
Yes, they have.
And we keep running into federal judges saying he can't move forward. And we really tried in the last farm bill, the food stamps are through the farm bill, to make it forward. We got it blocked in the Senate. And I think under this current Congress with the current leadership, probably it's going to take another election and see how that rolls out to get people in place to try. And what I try to tell people, we don't want to do it because we want to punish people because they need help. We want to do it because these people are needed. They're wanted. We have an economy that's growing.
Oh, yes.
We have skills that are lacking. We have businesses that are begging. And now all of a sudden we have people who've been on the sidelines for whatever reason. Maybe it's decisions they made, they got in bad situations, just whatever. But in your business is one. You're open arms.
Oh, yeah.
You want to bring them in. Another thing
We
we
want
need
to train them.
reform, we can get people coming out of if they're nonviolent, coming out of our prison system. We have a lot of people recidivism because we can't get people in the workplace because of some laws and some risks that employers have. I'm hoping to change where you can take some chances on people coming out of been reformed in our prisons. And I was in a meeting with Ivanka Trump, and that's one of her big things is how do we get family issues settled so people can go to work that are limited because of family issues, and how do we reach in to people in our justice system and get the skills that they need, because recidivism, if you walk out of prison and you can't find a job, you can't get work, and you get turned down, odds are, well, you just look at the numbers, you're going to go back.
Right.
But if people are plugged into society and feel like they're contributing, then they won't go back. And that's a big issue with the Trump family. I know Ivanka's leading it, but she wouldn't be pushing it if her father wasn't for it.
Right. Well, and Governor Bevin has really been a champion of this workforce development. I mean,
Absolutely.
just huge. Has dedicated lots of resources to pushing this workforce development, and in our process of getting approved through the state for our apprentice program, it may be the only time in my entire career it was an easy process within the government.
Because they wanted to.
They wanted to work, and they have bent over backwards to make this work and to make it easy. And it may be the single easiest thing I've ever done in a government entity to get approved.
It's good to know.
Yes, they did a really good job of that, and so. So anyway, lots of good conversation. You got anything you want to say to our audience before we close out?
Well, I can't say enough that if people show up with skills needed, they're going to be able to earn a great living for their families. And the promise that you can, go back to my 1982 in my high school, that if you graduated, you could earn a middle class income with absolutely nothing but a high school diploma. You can't do that now. Business
No, you cannot.
It's just the world is too competitive.
Yes.
The world is too global for you to show up and only have a high school diploma. However, you can work in real industry. When I say the old smokestack industry, we have an assembly line that does the battery tray for Ford hybrids that is automated. I mean, it is amazing. You're like you're working in a computer world when you walk in there. So just because you don't see a 4-year college degree, I'm push that for anybody that wants to do it. But just because you don't see a 4-year college degree in your pathway, doesn't mean you can't earn a great living and have respect and work hard. And if you're we keep talking about people coming out of high school, but there are a lot of people in their 30s and 40s that want to make career changes, and that pathway's there too.
Yes, it is. Well, we appreciate you coming in today.
Well, thanks for all your interest in this.
Glad to have you, and
your ability to do this. Your hard work.
thank you very much.
You have been listening to Gen Z, the official podcast of Ram Contracting from Springfield, Kentucky. Your host has been John Hayden. Thank you for listening, and we will join each other again soon.